Welcome to our channel, where we share thrilling stories, biographies of amazing people, daily life conversations, English phrases, and idioms to boost your vocabulary. Our videos are designed to improve your listening skills with clear, easy-to-understand English. Every video is informative, knowledgeable, and inspiring for your future. Today's story is about one of the most important and unforgettable events in human history, World War I. We will explore how it started, what led to it, and how it shaped the world. This will be a powerful and detailed journey through history, explained in the simplest way so that you can improve your English while learning about history. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment on what you think about World War I. Chapter 1. The Spark That Set the World on Fire. The year is 1914, and Europe is like a house built on weak foundations, waiting for the slightest tremor to bring everything crashing down. Nations have been competing for power, growing their armies, forming secret alliances, and watching each other with suspicion. The air is thick with tension. A single spark could ignite an explosion. On June 28, 1914, the morning sun casts a warm glow over the city of Sarajevo, Bosnia. It is a day of celebration. The streets are decorated with flags, and people line up along the roads, waiting for the arrival of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. With him is his wife, Sophie, elegant and smiling as she waves at the crowd. They have come on an official visit, but beneath the surface, Sarajevo is a city boiling with anger. Many Serbians despise Austrian rule and dream of a free Serbia. Hidden among the crowd are assassins, young, determined, and ready to strike. One of them is Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Serbian nationalist. He is small, thin, with dark eyes filled with determination. He belongs to a secret organization called the Black Hand, whose goal is simple: kill Franz Ferdinand and send a message to Austria. The Archduke's car, an open-top vehicle, moves slowly through the streets. The crowd cheers, but the assassins are waiting. Suddenly, one of them throws a bomb. The bomb flies through the air, spinning toward the car. But at the last second, Franz Ferdinand sees it and throws it away. Boom! The explosion shatters windows, injuring officers and civilians. Smoke fills the street, screams, panic, people running in every direction. The assassins scatter, knowing they have failed. The police capture the bomber within minutes. But the Archduke is alive. He should have left the city immediately. But instead, he makes a decision that will seal his fate. Instead of returning to safety, Franz Ferdinand insists on visiting the hospital to see the officers injured in the bombing. He is a military man, proud and stubborn. He refuses to show fear. His driver, nervous and shaken, takes a wrong turn onto a small street. At that exact moment, Gavrilo Princip is standing outside a cafe. He had been sulking in frustration, thinking the mission had failed. But then, he sees the Archduke's car. It has stopped right in front of him. His hands tremble, but his mind is clear. He pulls out his pistol. One deep breath. A bullet tears through Franz Ferdinand's neck. A second shot hits Sophie in the stomach. The driver panics, speeds away. Blood spreads across the Archduke's uniform. He tries to speak but chokes on his own blood. Sophie, already unconscious, slumps onto him. Within minutes, both are dead. Europe will never be the same again. The news spreads like wildfire. Austria-Hungary is outraged. The government immediately blames Serbia and demands that Serbia punish those responsible. But Serbia, feeling confident with Russia's support, refuses to bow down. Austria-Hungary sees this as an act of defiance. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia, bound by an alliance with Serbia, declares war on Austria-Hungary. The dominoes begin to fall. Germany, Austria-Hungary's closest ally, declares war on Russia. France, Russia's ally, declares war on Germany. Germany, eager to strike first, invades Belgium to attack France. Britain, protecting Belgium, declares war on Germany. Within a single week, all of Europe is at war. Men rush to enlist, believing the war will be short. It will be over by Christmas, they say. But they have no idea of the horror that awaits them. This will not be a quick war. It will last 4 years. It will kill millions. It will change the world forever. Chapter 2. The World on Fire. It's August 1914, and the streets of Europe are buzzing with excitement. But this isn't the excitement of celebrations or joy. It's the excitement of war. Thousands of men, young and old, are rushing to the recruiting stations, ready to fight for their country. Many of them are dreaming of adventure, believing that the war will be quick, a short and glorious battle. They have no idea that they are walking into the worst conflict the world has ever seen. There is no turning back now. In Germany, the streets are alive with patriotism. The people have high hopes that their country will come out on top. Germany's army, one of the most powerful in Europe, prepares for action. The Kaiser Wilhelm II sits at his desk, his eyes gleaming with ambition. He believes in his country's might and is certain that Germany will conquer all of Europe. Austria-Hungary is determined to crush Serbia. After the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Austrians see this as an opportunity to assert their dominance in the Balkans. The Austro-Hungarian Empire has been struggling with its own problems for years. It's old, fragile, and divided, but the war gives it a chance to prove its strength once and for all. In Russia, the mood is a bit different. The vast Russian Empire is enormous, but it is also deeply divided and poorly prepared for war. However, Tsar Nicholas II knows that he must defend Serbia, which is a close ally. Russia marches toward the battlefield, hoping to assert its power and protect its interests in the Balkans. Across Europe, there is a growing sense of unease. The alliances between nations. Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy on one side, Russia, France, and Britain on the other, are pulling the continent toward a giant storm. But no one really understands how much this war will change everything. The world enters the war. August 1st, 1914. Germany declares war on Russia, believing it is the right move to protect its borders and secure its future. The next day, France declares war on Germany in support of its Russian ally. On August 3rd, Germany invades Belgium, marching toward France, hoping to avoid a two-front war by defeating the French quickly. Belgium's neutral status is ignored. Germany doesn't care. The Belgian army fights bravely, but they are overwhelmed. Thousands of civilians flee in terror as German soldiers march through their towns, burning villages and taking control of cities. Belgium's capital, Brussels, falls under German occupation. The world watches in horror. The brutality of the invasion shocks everyone. But it also has a ripple effect. Britain, who had promised to protect Belgium's neutrality, declares war on Germany on August 4th, 1914. Now, it's no longer just a few countries involved. The entire continent is in flames. As the war stretches on, something unexpected happens. Instead of quick, decisive battles, The war turns into a grinding, slow battle of attrition. Both sides dig in and begin to build trenches, deep, muddy, rat-infested holes in the ground where soldiers live, fight, and die. This is where the war truly starts to change. For the next 4 years, millions of men will live in these trenches, fighting for small pieces of land that will cost them everything. Imagine a soldier waking up in the morning. The first thing he feels is the cold mud beneath him. The smell of rot, sweat, and blood fills the air. Above ground, there is nothing but gunfire, explosions, and death. The soldiers are constantly under attack, sometimes from machine guns, sometimes from artillery shells that explode in the air with terrifying force. But it's not just the fighting that is terrifying. It's the mental toll that war takes on these soldiers. The constant fear, the feeling of hopelessness. They are stuck in the trenches with no way out, no future. The war seems endless. Every day is a battle just to stay alive. The Western Front, a line that stretches from the North Sea through Belgium and across northern France, becomes the most horrific part of the war. In these muddy trenches, men will fight for months over a few inches of land. No matter how hard they fight, no matter how many soldiers are lost, they are always at a standstill. The Germans on one side and the Allied forces, Britain, France, and later the United States, on the other. It's like a deadlock, a constant push and pull. One of the first major battles on the Western Front is the Battle of the Marne in September 1914. The Germans have advanced close to Paris, and it seems like they might win the war quickly. But then, the French and British forces fight back, stopping the German advance just in time. The Germans are forced to retreat, and the front lines settle into that deadly trench warfare. But in the trenches, it's not just soldiers who suffer. It's the civilians, too. Entire towns are destroyed. Homes are lost. Families are torn apart. Many civilians are forced to flee their homes, leaving everything behind just to survive. The Eastern Front in the east, between Russia and Austria-Hungary, is just as brutal. But it's different. The Russian army, though large, is poorly equipped and disorganized. Germany and Austria-Hungary crush them, forcing Russia to retreat. The Tsar's soldiers suffer terribly, starving and freezing in the harsh winter. But still, the war rages on. Months go by, and the soldiers begin to realize that they are trapped. They are stuck in a cycle of violence with no end in sight. The war, which seemed like it would be over in a few months, is now stretching into years. The fighting is endless. The suffering is unimaginable. There are moments of brief calm when the soldiers in the trenches can hear nothing but silence, only for it to be broken by a sudden barrage of artillery. The war is always looming, always a threat, and as the war rages on, other countries begin to enter. In 1915, the Ottoman Empire joins the Central Powers, and the United States begins to grow involved, though it will be another 2 years before they officially declare war on Germany in 1917. Meanwhile, in the trenches, the soldiers' lives become a strange mix of fear, boredom, and determination. They hear the sounds of machine guns and shells exploding in the distance. At night, they count the stars and wonder if they will see the sunrise. Their friends die beside them, and they wonder, why? Why is all of this happening? What is it all for? And yet, they march on, driven by a sense of duty and loyalty. But the worst part is yet to come. The use of new weapons, poison gas, tanks, and machine guns will soon change the face of war. The trench lines will become even more dangerous, and the soldiers will face even greater suffering than they ever imagined. This is only the beginning. The world is still in the early stages of this monstrous conflict. And yet, the soldiers know this. The war will only grow worse, and it will not be the short battle they imagined. The fire has started. The world will burn. Chapter 3. The war rages on. Imagine yourself in the middle of a battlefield. The sky is gray, filled with the sound of explosions and gunfire. There's no way to escape the noise, the chaos, the fear. The air smells of smoke, death, and mud. You're cold, you're hungry, and you don't know how long you'll survive. This is trench warfare, where men fight not for glory or honor, but just to stay alive. In the trenches, soldiers live like animals. They sleep in cold, damp conditions, often lying in filth, surrounded by rats and the bodies of the dead. The mud is so deep it feels like it will swallow you whole. There's no escape. For miles, there's nothing but dirt, barbed wire, and the constant sound of machine guns firing in the distance. Every soldier in the trench faces this same grim reality. But it's not just the physical conditions that break them. The mental toll is just as horrifying. Every day you fear being shot, being blown to pieces, or dying from disease. Shell shock becomes common, a terrifying condition where soldiers lose their minds from the constant pressure. Many soldiers will never recover from the psychological scars of war. The constant waiting, the fear of the unknown, the constant feeling that death is just around the corner is too much for them to handle. New weapons of destruction. In the trenches, the soldiers face not only bullets and shrapnel, but also new, deadly weapons that change the way wars are fought. The first use of poison gas happens in 1915 by the Germans. Imagine this: a green cloud rolling over the battlefield, carrying with it death and suffering. Soldiers are caught completely off guard. Some of them die slowly and painfully, suffocating to death as they struggle for breath. The gas doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care whether you're young or old, fit or weak. It simply takes away your life. The smell of it, the fear of it, is enough to turn any soldier into a nervous wreck. They don't know when it will come, but when it does, there's nowhere to hide. And that's just one of the new weapons. Alongside poison gas, machine guns, artillery shells, and even the first tanks are introduced. The tanks, which are supposed to be the future of warfare, are slow and clunky, but they can smash through trenches and crush soldiers under their heavy tracks. As new weapons are used, the fighting becomes even more brutal and indescribably horrible. Soldiers who once thought the war would be over soon, perhaps with a quick victory, now realize that this is something completely different. This is no longer about glory. It's about survival. Now let's talk about one of the most brutal and infamous battles of World War I, the Battle of Verdun, which begins in February 1916. The French know that Verdun is crucial. It's a symbol of French strength, and if they lose it, it would be a devastating blow to their pride and their morale. The Germans, under General Erich von Falkenhayn, have a different plan. They want to bleed the French army dry. The idea is simple: to inflict so many casualties on the French that they'll be forced to surrender. They believe that France will fight to the last man to protect Verdun. And they're right. The battle rages for nearly 10 months with unimaginable casualties. Every inch of land is fought over. Soldiers are so close to each other that they can smell the enemy's sweat, hear their voices, and see the terror in their eyes. The fighting is so intense that every day feels like an eternity. There are constant bombardments, and soldiers are forced to take cover in the deep, damp bunkers. The French are fighting for their homeland, and they refuse to back down. But the Germans are just as determined. Thousands of men die each day. The smell of death fills the air. At the end of Verdun, the French have lost 300,000 men, and the Germans have lost nearly the same number. And for what? Nothing. The front lines don't move. The soldiers are no closer to victory than they were before the battle began. As the battlefields of World War I grow more brutal, the nature of warfare itself begins to change. This is no longer a war of glorious charges and bravery on horseback. This is a war of technology, of machines, and of death from a distance. The soldiers who fought in this war are no longer fighting face to face. They are fighting in trenches, behind barbed wire, and using weapons of mass destruction. But what's even more heartbreaking is that entire generations of men are being lost in this war. Young men, many of them still boys at heart, are sent off to die in a foreign land, never to return home. These men are fighting not for freedom or honor, but because they've been told that it's their duty. They fight not for a cause they believe in, but because they have no choice. For the families at home, the war becomes an endless wait. Mothers, wives, and children wait for letters from the front, hoping that their loved ones are still alive. They cling to every word, reading them over and over, hoping to catch some hint that their soldier is safe. But for many families, these letters stop coming. They receive only the dreaded news of death. In the quiet of the night, as they sit by the fire, they know that their world has changed forever. They know that the son, the husband, the brother they once knew, may never come home. The war spreads. New fronts open. Meanwhile, the war is spreading beyond Europe. In 1915, the Ottoman Empire joins the Central Powers and opens up a new front in the Middle East. The Gallipoli campaign is a disastrous failure for the Allies, with thousands of men losing their lives for little gain. The Ottoman soldiers, like the European forces, fight bravely and fiercely. But the fighting in this region is just as brutal and deadly as it is in Europe. In Africa, the war is fought on a different scale. Here, the Allied forces fight the Germans over colonies and territories, with native soldiers fighting in battles they don't fully understand. They fight for countries that aren't their own, and they fight against enemies they've never met. But still, they fight because war has become a reality for everyone, no matter where they are in the world. Chapter 4. The Turning Tide of the War. As the years drag on, the war shows no sign of ending. It becomes clear that both sides are fighting not just for victory, but for survival. The war has taken on a life of its own, and each side has become more desperate to outlast the other. The fighting has become endless. It feels as though there will be no end to the suffering. The French, the British, the Germans, all of them are drained. They've lost millions of soldiers, families have been torn apart, and there's no clear winner in sight. Imagine being in a trench, facing the same enemy day after day. The same endless bombardments, the same horrifying screams, the same mounds of bodies. You begin to wonder if there's anything worth fighting for anymore. But despite all of this, the soldiers continue to fight, not for glory, but because they must. By 1917, the situation is desperate for the Allies. The Central Powers, led by Germany, are pushing hard, and the Allied forces are running out of strength. The French soldiers have fought tirelessly for years, but they're exhausted, both physically and mentally. The British forces are also struggling, and the United States has just entered the war, bringing hope but also new challenges. It's in the year 1917 that a new sense of urgency begins to spread. The Allies know they need to win, and they need to win soon, before the Germans completely break them. The German army, too, is starting to show signs of wear. The soldiers are tired, they're hungry, they're starting to lose hope. The shocks of war have left their mark on everyone, and the Germans know that they are fighting on the brink of collapse. The United States enters the war. Then, in April 1917, something incredible happens. The United States enters the war. President Woodrow Wilson declares war on Germany, and it is like a spark that ignites a wildfire. The American soldiers bring a fresh energy, new resources, and a massive supply of men to the battle. Suddenly, the Allies have a new force behind them, and the Germans realize they are facing an enemy they cannot defeat alone. The arrival of the United States is like a breath of life for the Allies. The soldiers, who have fought for so long, are given renewed strength. The American soldiers don't know the full horror of the war they are entering, but they are full of patriotism and a desire to help their allies. Their numbers are overwhelming, and with them comes technology and modern tactics that will change the course of the war. The Allies' great offensive begins in 1918. With the help of fresh American troops, the British and the French launch a massive counterattack. This is no longer a battle of attrition. This is a decisive move, a last-ditch effort to break the Germans. The Allied forces push through the German lines with an intensity they have never had before. For the first time in years, they begin to make real gains. The Germans, who had once been confident in their victory, are now reeling. The strength of the United States, combined with the sheer determination of the French and British, is too much for the Central Powers. As the Allied forces march forward, there is a sense of hope, but also fear. Everyone knows this could be the end of the war, but no one knows how many more lives will be lost before it's over. The Germans, fighting in trenches, are pushed further and further back. Desperate, they continue to fight, but every step forward by the Allies feels like a step closer to the end of the war. As the Allied forces advance, something incredible happens. The Central Powers begin to collapse. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, one of the main members of the Central Powers, begins to disintegrate. Its soldiers are exhausted, its empire is crumbling, and it can no longer fight. In October 1918, Austria-Hungary surrenders to the Allies. This is a crucial moment because it means that the Central Powers are no longer united. Germany, the last remaining power, is now alone, facing a massive coalition of enemies. The Germans, too, begin to feel the pressure of the war they have been fighting for so long. Their supplies are running out, their soldiers are deserting, and their morale is at an all-time low. In November 1918, after months of fierce fighting, the German government asks for an armistice, a ceasefire. The war is finally over. The end of the war. The aftermath. On November 11th, 1918, at 11 a.m., the guns fall silent. The world holds its breath. The war is over. The armistice is signed, and for the first time in 4 long years, there is peace. The soldiers who have been fighting for so long now look at the battlefield around them, and they realize that the price of peace has been too high. The world is left in ruins. Millions are dead, millions more are wounded. Entire families are torn apart. Cities lie in ruins. The world is scarred, physically and emotionally. The suffering, the loss, and the pain are beyond comprehension. But even in the midst of the sorrow, there is a feeling of relief, a feeling of hope. The nightmare is finally over, and the soldiers can now go home, though they will never truly be the same. They will carry the memories of the war with them forever. After 4 years of relentless fighting, the war left a mark on the earth so deep that its effects would echo for generations. 20 million people, 20 million lives were lost. The numbers themselves are almost incomprehensible. Imagine whole cities wiped out, entire families erased, all because of this war. The number of dead soldiers alone was staggering. 9 million soldiers from all sides lost their lives in the trenches, on the battlefield, and in air raids. The soldiers, brave men who had once been children full of hopes and dreams, became mere statistics, numbers in a grim report. Men went to war, and some never even returned, leaving behind grieving wives, mothers, and children who would never feel their touch again. But it wasn't just the soldiers who paid the price. 10 million civilians, mothers, fathers, children, the elderly, died as well. Entire villages were destroyed. Food supplies were cut off. Disease and hunger spread like wildfire, killing without mercy. The physical toll of the war was visible in the form of destroyed landscapes. Homes burned to the ground, fields filled with craters, and cities reduced to rubble. But the emotional toll? That's something no number can ever fully capture. Imagine the despair and hopelessness people felt as they returned to their homes, only to find them gone. There were no more family dinners. The laughter of children was replaced with silence. The streets were empty where once there were vibrant communities. Those who survived carried invisible scars, mental wounds that would never fully heal. The trauma of the war lingered, making it hard for the survivors to find peace even in the most ordinary moments. The price of victory. Though the Allies had claimed victory, the cost of that victory was beyond anyone's expectations. What's the point of winning when the price is so high? Victory had become hollow. There was no celebration in the streets, only the quiet mourning of those who had returned and the wailing of those who had lost loved ones. Even the leaders who signed the armistice, thinking they had secured peace, couldn't escape the fact that the world had changed forever. Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany, once the proud ruler of an empire, had been forced to abdicate. Austria-Hungary, a once mighty empire, was split into pieces. Nations that had once been the giants of Europe were now broken. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire, all had crumbled under the weight of war. The leaders gathered in Versailles, France, to sign the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. It was supposed to be a treaty of peace, but instead, it set the stage for future turmoil. The treaty placed the blame for the war squarely on Germany's shoulders, forcing the country to pay heavy reparations and disarm its military. Germany was humiliated, and its people felt betrayed by their own government. This treaty sowed the seeds of resentment and anger that would eventually give rise to World War II. And what about the soldiers who made it back? The men who returned from the front lines, who had witnessed horrors beyond imagination? They came home, but they were never truly the same. The physical scars were easy to see, limbs lost, wounds that would never heal. But the mental scars were hidden deep inside them. The war had broken something in them that could never be fixed. Imagine being one of these men, walking back into a world that feels completely foreign. A world where people talk of peace, but you've seen the worst of humanity. You've stared death in the face, heard the screams of your friends, and smelled the fumes of burning cities. How could you return to normal life after that? Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, wasn't recognized back then, but many of these men carried it with them for the rest of their lives. Nightmares, flashbacks, and overwhelming feelings of guilt. They had survived, but at what cost? They had sacrificed their innocence, their humanity, and their futures. Many of these men could never truly reintegrate into society. The world had moved on, but they had been left behind, lost in the shadow of war. But in the ashes of this destruction, there was also a sense of rebirth. New countries were formed from the rubble of the old empires. Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia were born, nations carved from the lands of the fallen Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and its lands were divided among the Allies, changing the face of the Middle East forever. The Russian Empire also collapsed, leading to the Russian Revolution of 1917, where Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks took control, setting the stage for the rise of the Soviet Union. The old powers were gone, but new powers were emerging, and the world was rapidly changing. For many, this was a time of hope, a time when people believed they could build a better world. But the scars of the war would remain, and the lessons learned would never be forgotten. As the survivors picked up the pieces of their shattered lives, they also carried the memory of the war with them, hoping to never see anything like it again. Today, when we think about World War I, we don't just think about the battles, the weapons, and the politics. We think about the lives lost, the dreams shattered, and the families destroyed. We think about the soldiers who went to war, not knowing they would never return. We think about the survivors who came home, only to find that their home was no longer the same. Every memorial, every grave, every poignant symbol, they remind us of what happened. The war may be over, but its legacy lives on. The soldiers who died are not just numbers. They are fathers, sons, brothers, friends. We must never forget them. And as we reflect on the war, we realize that the true lesson is not just about the horrors of war, but about the importance of peace. We must honor the memories of those who fought and died by ensuring that their sacrifices were not in vain. We must work to create a world where such a catastrophe never happens again. The fire of this war still burns in our hearts today. The lessons we learned about the consequences of unchecked nationalism, about the horrors of warfare, and about the power of resilience are lessons we must carry with us forever. The world has changed, but we must remember. The pain and loss of World War I should never be forgotten. It is a part of our history, and it is a reminder that peace must never be taken for granted. And so, the story of World War I ends, but its echoes will never fade. It is a story that will continue to teach us, to remind us, and to shape our future.